Hello everybody and welcome to OmniPoke, the channel that brings you everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTC geocodes, including the latest set, Crown Zenith, make sure you check out the Potown store where you can use code OmniPoke for 5% off your order. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the brand newly revealed Snow Hazard and Clay Burst sets that were revealed not too long ago, a couple of hours ago to be honest. We've known about these for a little while, but they've officially been revealed now, and we've got some very, very exciting cards. These are going to make up the second half of our Paldea Evolved set, including that triple beat, in combination with those triple beat cards that we looked at a couple of weeks ago. That set was relatively underwhelming, but this is definitely nothing to sniff at. There are some incredible cards in this set. Very exciting stuff. So let's get straight on with it. I'm going to start with the trainers as always, and the first thing we're going to look at is a Super Rod reprint. Shuffle 3 in any combination of Pokemon and basic energy from your discard pile back into your deck. This is a brilliant card to have. We have pretty good energy and Pokemon recovery right now. We have Clara, which is very, very strong, but it's a supporter card. We have Miriam, which is also a supporter card. But we also have things like Energy Recycler. So we have very, very strong energy and Pokemon recovery, but it's all kind of limited to either being a supporter or being limited to only getting one or the other. Super Rod is just that flexible in between that is going to see so much play. It's a really, really strong card. It's always seen play in formats it's been in, and I'm really, really pleased to see it, especially in formats where it looks like Stage 2s are going to be pushed a little bit more as well. It's a really nice one to have. I still think some decks will definitely choose to play Clara, and I still think some decks will definitely choose to play Miriam, because both of those are also very strong. But I think Super Rod is just a catch-all for all of those kinds of, for many other decks, and even decks that, decks that maybe wouldn't want to play a Miriam because it's just too slow or something like that. They're going to be looking for something like a Super Rod. So yeah, really, really pleased to see this one. Definitely a good reprint to have. Next up, we have Charm of Courage, a trainer, a Pokemon tool card. The basic Pokemon this card is attached to gets plus 50 HP, so it's kind of like a Cape of Toughness, but it can be attached to GXs and expanded, which is interesting. Yeah, Cape is a really interesting one. It sees quite a bit of play in some of these basic heavy decks, but in general, a lot of these other decks, a lot of those decks also look for things like damage modifiers, like Choice Belt and stuff. But yeah, this is a pretty strong card. 50 HP is a huge amount of HP. Excuse me. Limited to basic Pokemon means that we're not going to have massive Stage 2 EXs and stuff, which I think is a good thing. But yeah, giving basics a little extra push is pretty cool. Obviously, tools have to be a bit stronger because they're a bit harder to find these days because of the new the new tool change, meaning that they aren't classed as items anymore. So I like pushing this a little bit. Yeah, it's interesting that it's basically identical to Cape of Toughness, which is kind of weird. But I think Cape is a card that isn't too. It's like borderline not very fun to play against, but because plus HP rather than damage reduction can always be dealt with by discarding the tool with things like Lost Vacuum or something, or I guess lost zoning the tool with Lost Vacuum. It kind of means it's not quite as sort of annoying to play against as if this was something like reduce the amount of damage taken by 30 or whatever, because you often get to sort of double dip on those types of tools, whereas this is just a flat 50 HP increase, which is very similar in terms of how much HP you have if you're getting hit twice into a tool like that, but is a little bit nicer to play against because there's a bit more counterplay with things like Lost Vacuum and stuff. So yeah, I don't mind seeing a bit of basic support. I still think we're going to be in a really weird format where there's some very strong basics with things like Miraidon and stuff. There's some very strong Stage 1s with things like the V-Stars, and there's some very strong Stage 2s with things like Guardy. So I like trying to push all of these different avenues a little bit. Yeah, and Charm of Courage definitely does that for basic Pokemon. There's also 2 really interesting basic EXs in this set as well. Well, there's 3 that we've seen so far that could make use of this as well. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. On to the supporters, we have Grusha. Grusha says draw cards until you have 5 cards in hand. If you have no energy cards attached to any of your Pokemon, draw until you have 7 instead. Really interesting one. There is an archetype in this set that does discard energy from your board. which is pretty interesting, and maybe we could see some kind of synergy there. I think realistically it's a little bit too weak. Having no energy on your board is quite a big drawback, especially when you want to be playing energy down to thin your hand down to draw from Grusha. So I think it's a little bit limiting, and I think because of that it's not really going to see play, but it's definitely an interesting effect, and we'll have to see whether there's, obviously this is a pretty strong supporter in a deck that maybe has very low energy attack costs, or, you know, something like a deck that only plays double turbo energy, or even plays no energy or something like that. It could be pretty interesting. I think that's going to be the application for a supporter like this, rather than, as you'll see, there's like a Rain Dance style deck that they're introducing in this set. And I don't really think the application is going to be there, because I think whilst it's a nice sort of sentiment, you don't attach any of your energy, you draw until you have 7, and then you attach all of them, and then you discard all of them. It's quite a nice sentiment, but I think realistically it's just going to be a little bit too inconsistent, and most of the time you're going to be wanting to attach those energy to draw more cards anyway. So I think realistically, and also if you don't need to discard all of those energy, you're going to need to leave some on the board, which means Grusha isn't going to be active anyway. So I think realistically this is probably actually more of a card that you'll see, if you're ever going to see it, in decks that do play a very low amount of energy, like double turbos, or maybe even control decks that don't play any energy sometimes and just play all of these sort of disruptive tools and stuff. That kind of thing, I think, is potentially more likely, or going to be more likely, where we're going to more likely see Grusha see play. So yeah, a very interesting one, but I think that's realistically where it's going to fall. And this is the big one, Iono. We knew about this card, but we didn't know what it was going to do. It turns out it's pretty crazy. Each player shuffles their hand and puts it to the bottom of their deck. Then each player draws a card for each of their remaining prize cards. So it's basically a combination of Marnie and N, which is fantastic. I don't think anyone particularly likes the Marnie style shuffle their hand and put it onto the bottom of their deck a lot of the time, because you know sometimes that the resource you need is all the way at the bottom, and you're going to have to find some kind of shuffle effect to get it back to the top to try and draw it, which is kind of annoying. But this being a comeback card, this being able to limit or thin your opponent's hand down, a bit like a Roxanne, but also being potentially a draw card in the early turns, is what reminds me of N. It's a very, very strong card. I think this is going to see a lot of play. It's one of those where you kind of look at it and think, oh, of course it's going to see play. It's a combination of Marnie and N, which have been, you know, some of the best cards of their respective sets. I think there's a little bit of ambiguity there, just because we actually have, we already have like a comeback card in Roxanne. We already have great early draw, but I think this is just too good to pass up. This is a combination of like Roxanne plus early draw. So again, in that N sort of feel where you're able to use it as a draw supporter to help setting up, and then later on in the game it's a disruption piece. It's actually more disrupting than N, because it puts the cards to the bottom of the deck for your opponent. So yeah, I think this card is absolutely fantastic, and I think it's going to see huge amounts of play, unless I'm missing something like staring me in the face, which I don't think I am. But I think this card is like pretty bonkers in terms of it feels like a more disruptive N, but no real downside to the early game. Obviously there is downside in that if you've got a combo piece, you put it to the bottom of the deck and you need to find that combo piece plus the other combo piece again. So there is like minor sort of downsides, I guess, to sort of stage 2 decks and that kind of thing. But I think for like stage 1 decks, basic decks, even some of the stage 2 decks anyway, but yeah, this feels like a very strong card. It also feels like an insanely strong card for control decks as well, because again, it's more disruptive than N, because you're a lot of the time putting resources that they've been gathering throughout the game to try and beat your control-y combo. You're putting them to the bottom of the deck. Now, admittedly, if they don't have those resources, you put them to the bottom of the deck and they're more likely to draw them, whereas N would shuffle all of those dead cards back into their deck, and they would have them as potentially draw outs again. So it's one of those sort of like side grades, but I think it's an upgrade realistically for a lot of situations, which is kind of weird to say, because I think a lot of people don't like the put to the bottom of the deck part of the of Marnie. But I think the bigger thing with Marnie is you only draw 4 cards. Like, your opponent can do it going first, and you can only going second, and then on your second turn of the game, you've only drawn 4 cards. Whereas this, you're always drawing back up to 7, which is really, really good because it means it's not a disruption piece in the early game, which I basically think is the biggest issue of Marnie overall. So yeah, I think this card is absolutely fantastic. I could be massively wrong with this. I could be missing something. It's very early in the day here for me, but I'm pretty sure I've read this card and I've read, a lot of people's opinions, and I'm pretty sure this is just as good as it says it is. It's basically a side grade of N, but potentially upgrade because it's not as disruptive. It's like a side grade of N and Marnie, like a combination of them both. It's not disruptive in the early game, which, whilst you won't be Marnie cheesing people anymore, I think everyone would rather try and play the game, but it's more disruptive a lot of the time in the late game, and even in the situations where it's not as disruptive as N in the late game, it's still basically a Roxanne. So yeah, I think it's a very, very strong card, and I expect it to see a lot of play, which is pretty interesting because I didn't think they would ever do an N reprint, and it's not an N reprint. I really thought, I've said for a little while I really don't think we're ever going to get an N reprint, but this is like the closest I think we're ever going to get, which is pretty exciting. So, but anyway, on to the Pokemon. I'm going to start with Relor. A couple of Relors. Bullroll has infinite damage technically, but again, nothing crazy. Chi-Yu EX is the first EX Pokemon. It's one of these 4, I can't remember what they're called, signature Pokemon or Treasures of Ruin legendaries. I still haven't played this game. Treasures of Ruin legendaries. So these are all basic Pokemon that I believe are based on a particular treasure. So this one's based on some pearls, and I think that they have a lot to do with sort of Chinese folklore and stuff. I need to investigate more because it sounds like some really interesting stuff. But yeah, so we've got Chi-Yu EX, Fire type, 190 HP basic. First attack, for a fire, Burning Envy, discard the top 2 cards from your opponent's deck. And then for 2 fire, Flame Surge, 100 damage, and you choose up to 3 of your benched Pokemon. Search your deck for a basic fire and attach 1 to each of those Pokemon. Then shuffle your deck. So there's kind of 2 aspects to this card. There's the acceleration aspect, which I think is pretty interesting, but the fact you have to get 2 fires on in the first place is a little bit annoying. We have some fire acceleration. We have things like Magma Basin, plus Armor Rouge from turn 2 onwards. But we don't have like great acceleration to be able to set this up in the first place to then attach these energy to then, like, it feels like you're kind of doing an extra step when you should just be attaching to that Pokemon, the Pokemon you want to be accelerating to anyway, if you're spending 2 attachments. But you're getting a nice little 100 damage poke at least, I guess. And with Armor Rouge, it kind of doesn't matter where you put the energy. You're happy to spread the energy around because then you can just, I can't remember what I think it's called Flame Cannon or Fire Starter or something. I can't remember, but push all the energy to the active and put it all onto one Pokemon on the following turn when the Chi-Yu has been knocked out. So it's all right. I don't think it's particularly strong. I think it's just a little bit too expensive. And it's a lot of steps to have to power this up and then get an Armor Rouge out, and then once you've got the Armor Rouge out, get your actual attacker out. It feels like it's just going to be better off trying to, power up the Pokemon itself rather than go through all of these steps, which is interesting. The other sort of aspect is the Burning Envy, discard 2 cards to the top of your deck aspect. We have that the new tool, the Charm of Courage, I think it was called, that gives us an extra 50 HP, making it 240, which is a little bit tankier for sure. And we've seen things like Houndoom Mill work in the past, which was the exact same thing, which is really interesting. I think realistically, because it's a 2-prizer and the game's a bit quicker these days, it's probably going to be too slow to be able to build like a mill deck like this. But I think if there's a deck around this, for now, it's probably going to be around this discard part. The acceleration definitely has potential for the future if we get better fire acceleration, using like front loading your fire acceleration into this to then be able to power up multiple attackers or something. I definitely can see this attack being pretty strong. If you're able to pull this off turn 1 with some kind of acceleration, that would be really, really impressive. And to be honest, that might be that I think that'll be when this is potentially looked at for the Flame Surge attack, but I just don't think we have particularly good ways of actually being able to do that in the current format. So, yeah, I think this is probably relatively underwhelming. Maybe this Burning MVC is some kind of play, but I think just on a 2-prize Pokemon, a 190 HP 2-prize Pokemon, I think is just a little bit too fragile to be able to realistically mill the opponent's cards before you actually get, before you actually lose the game. So yeah, a little bit underwhelming for that one, but hey ho. Whoops. So next up we have Frigibax, a couple of Frigibaxes, an Arctobax, and then Baxcalibur. This is an interesting one because we are going to basically be getting Rain Dance back. As often as you like during your turn, you may attach a basic water energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon. Yeah, this is essentially Rain Dance for water energy again. It's been a little while since we've seen proper Rain Dance. We've had things like Frostmoth and stuff. But this is proper Rain Dance, which is interesting. You'll see why it's relevant in a second. I can't think of massive uses for this outside of something a EX Pokemon I'm just about to show you. Things like Gyarados and stuff would appreciate Rain Dance, but even then, Gyarados EX needing 5 energy to sometimes not take a knockout is just woeful, to be honest. So, and you'll see that we'll be able to attach 5 energy much better elsewhere in a moment. So I think realistically, this is a combo card for the chein-pao EX that I'm going to look at in a sec. But there could be some other uses. I'm trying to think of whether there's any other water Pokemon. Because we already have Origin Palkia, we kind of already have mini Rain Dance on a turn. So this could be like a back burner a little bit, or just a very thin line in that in the Rain Dance deck for a while, in like the water attacking Rain Dance deck for a while. I have to wait and see. The fact it's a water type is huge because we basically can almost guarantee this with Irida, which is fantastic. Being able to just search for the Baxcalibur plus Rare Candy is very, very strong. So I actually think this is going to be a pretty consistent stage 2 to get out if you want to get it out. And it's just about whether we have enough support to be able to actually make a water Rain Dance deck work. Now, interestingly, obviously we did lose Capacious Bucket. We do have, I think it's Candice that searches the top 7 for as many waters and stuff like that. So there's still some decent water acceleration, water support, but I think the main one is just playing a lot of energy and playing Irida is going to be like the biggest selling point. But the chein-pao EX also has some very good energy search as well. So yeah, this is a really, really strong card. Chein-pao EX, 220 HP water type, basic Pokemon. It's got the Trembling Cold ability once during a turn. If this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, you may search your deck for up to 2 basic water energy, reveal them, and put them into your hand and shuffle your deck. So this is essentially grabbing you 2 waters to attach with Baxcalibur, which is very, very strong. Not the easiest, it has True Retreat, so not the easiest to be able to switch in between a couple of these, but if you can, searching for 4 energy is really strong, because Hail Blizzard does 60 damage and you discard any amount of water energy from your Pokemon, and this does 60 damage for each card discarded this way. So if you can search out 4 energy, you're doing 240 damage at least. You then just need an additional attachment somewhere else from your supporter card or something like that. So yeah, that's some pretty strong damage. Being able to do 300 is very, very nice. Obviously, we want to kind of be doing 330, so this might fall a little bit short of some stage 2 EXs here and there, but I think this seems like a very, very efficient basic Pokemon, realistically. You can even run stuff like Origin Palkia in there to 1, act as a secondary attacker, but 2, also reattach all of those energy. Because you can discard them from anywhere on your board, you can reattach them with the Palkia and then discard them. So Palkia itself's V-Star power is essentially a plus 180 damage mod. And then with Trembling Cold, you can search for another 2. So basically at some point during the game, you can guarantee a 300 damage Hail Blizzard, which is crazy. Because it means you can also kind of chain a small one into a big one into a small one, or 2 large Hail Blizzards to take out 2 V-Stars or something. This is a basic Pokemon, so it can take that Charm of Courage as well to push you up to 270. Yeah, and as a water type, so again, has all the benefits of being able to play Irida and stuff like that. So yeah, this deck feels very, very strong. I can't think of any massive metal threats right now as well. There's things like Zamazenta, but but I think metal is a relatively good weakness to have. I'm just thinking off the top of my head whether there's anything crazy. And I don't think there is. I could be missing something obvious, but I don't think there is. But even so, you're relatively... You're not investing loads because you're a basic Pokemon. You're discarding energy off of you. So even if you do get knocked out, it's not like the end of the world. Yeah, this just seems like a very, very efficient attacker. Combos perfectly with Baxcalibur, but also has the additional support of being able to play the Irida engine, being able to play Origin Palkia, which is a very strong card. So yeah, very, very strong stuff. I'm pretty sure this is like the archetype they're handing us on a plate, and I think it's going to be a top tier one. It just looks too strong to not really be. Scalable damage. There'll be all sorts of one prize water Pokemon you can play that you can manually attach you with Baxcalibur as well. The Baxcalibur is actually tanky as well, so you don't need to worry too much about sniping and stuff like that. Yeah, it just feels like a very strong archetype overall. Variable damage, like I say, inbuilt acceleration, well, inbuilt the acceleration, but inbuilt like deck thinning and searching for the energy and stuff. Yeah, feels fantastic. I think it's definitely going to be a top tier archetype. Next up, we have a new Pikachu and Raichu. Not crazy. Search your deck for 2 basic lightning energy attachment to this Pokemon, so you basically charge yourself up and then do Thunderbolt, discarding them all for 200. Not particularly strong realistically, but some great artwork on the special illustration. Just having a nap on the trainer's bed with little sparks going everywhere. I do really like it. I think realistically it's just a little bit too slow. We have Rabsca that evolves from the Relor we looked at earlier on. Has the Revival Prayer attack. For 1 colorless, choose a Pokemon from your discard pile and put it onto your bench. That's pretty crazy. You can get any Pokemon. You can get Stage 2s, you can get EXs, you can get Vs, you can get V-Stars, you can get whatever you want, which is very, very interesting. This is a really interesting attack in the game as well, so I'm really glad that they've given it an interesting effect in the TCG. We'll have to wait and see whether it's worth investing into a Relor and a Rabsca and the sort of the space that provides. Because obviously you can only get one out. Things like Stage 2s like Gardevoir, they want to have their Curliers and their other Gardevoirs out, so it doesn't really work in that kind of sense. But maybe there's some specific Stage 2 EXs that you can grab. This feels like it could be a pretty interesting sort of control deck, or walling archetype or something like that, where you're able to thin out and discard a load of random Pokemon that aren't particularly useful in every matchup, and then just Revival Prayer the specific ones onto the board, like Pikachu VMAX or Duraludon VMAX, a bit like the Radiant Eternatus. Obviously, it's a lot more expensive because you have to play a Stage 1 line, you have to find an attachment and stuff like that. So I don't know whether it will be worth it, but I'm sure there'll be something that at least Sander does with this deck, but that many people do with this deck in terms of trying to get some cool combos out that normally would be a little bit more difficult. So yeah, very, very interesting effect. Someone far cleverer than me is going to have to work out how to break it. This artwork is absolutely phenomenal, by the way. I think it's my favorite art that has been revealed today. It just looks incredible. The colors are amazing. The Rabsca just floating upside down is brilliant. So yeah, really, really cool card. We have a couple of Knackley, a Knuckle Stack, and a Gargo Knuckle. Basically, the only... So Salt Cannon is potentially 180 for 3, which is pretty interesting. But the only real interesting thing about the Gargo Knuckle is it's a 180 HP Stage 2 with the Blessed Salt ability. During Pokemon Checkup, heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. Obviously, this is stackable. Now, again, you're going to have to get multiple Stage 2s out, but healing 60 damage in between turns is like... would be huge if you're able to get multiple of these out. You can make a really, really tanky deck with this. So, yeah, I think it's just worth noting. I think realistically it's going to be too slow, and you're going to need like we have Radiant Serena to be able to do the 20. So realistically, if you're playing Gargo Knuckle, you need 2 of these out, so you're healing 40. So for it to be better than Radiant Serena. So realistically, it's not really going to see play, but there could be some kind of healing deck. We've seen some of these healing decks in the past, things like Celesaur. Obviously, that was on a basic that you could heal damage. But again, if your deck is just devoted to being like a big tanky Pokemon and just getting some Garganicles out, maybe we could see something there. We have Ting-lu EX. 240 HP basic Pokemon, which is huge because, again, that charm pushes you to 290, which is absurd. Cursed Ground is the ability. If this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent's Pokemon with damage counters on them have no abilities. So, really interesting stuff. This excludes Pokemon EX, which is interesting. It's hard to sort of see where or how that sort of plays out, simply because we haven't seen this full, one, the full set, but two, how the meta is going to revolve post Scarlet and Violet, to know how important it is that it's excluding Pokemon EX. We don't have amazing ways of dealing damage to the active outside of just attacking it, but we do have Hawlucha to be able to put a counter on a couple of different basic or a couple of different Pokemon on the opponent's bench to stop them having abilities. So yeah, and Landscoop also does it as well. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I feel like it's a little bit limiting in terms of the actual ability lock it is. I don't know whether we have enough ways to manipulate or to place damage counters, or enough need to right now. But things like being able to just put a couple of counters on one of each of your opponent's Genesects or whatever seems really strong. Obviously, you can just gust around this and get out of this Cursed Ground ability. So you'd either have to play like a quad Ting-lu EX deck, which doesn't sound great because I think the only way you're attaching 3 fighting energy to this is probably Koraidon. Yeah, it all just feels like we're waiting for some kind of fighting accelerate, like supporter card or acceleration or something, to unlock a lot of these fighting cards. Koraidon is really strong, but unless you find it turn 1, it's just, I think, a little bit too weak. This is a very strong card, I think, in terms of ability lock, but I think realistically you need, like, if you're not playing quad Ting-lu, they're just going to be able to gust around you. Maybe I'm underselling this a little bit. I'm not sure. Landscoop does 150 for 3 fightings and puts 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So you do at least get to 1, start setting up another Pokemon, but 2, choose a specific Pokemon to stop them using abilities. I don't know. It feels like it's got a lot of really good things going for it, but I just think the acceleration seems a little bit awkward, or the being able to, like, how we're going to attach the energy to actually make this a threat in the active Pokemon. I just think that's the little bit missing at the moment. Maybe I'm missing something with this card. Let me know down in the comments if you think I'm underselling this. I definitely could be, but it just doesn't feel like quite as strong as, definitely doesn't feel as strong as the chein-pao, but it doesn't feel quite as strong as it may seem, even though it's ability lock, because having this in the active, you still have to play ways to get energy, to get damage counters onto the opponent's board, so you're still going to have to play Hawluchas and stuff, or find a way of accelerating to this, and even then you still need to find a way of accelerating to this to be able to actually make this kind of an attacking threat, so your opponent has to deal with it. It doesn't even really work as like a hit and switch kind of thing, because it's got full retreat, so it's going to be really difficult to move this once it's in the active position. So yeah, it just feels like things aren't quite falling right for this card, but maybe I'm wrong. Let me know down in the comments if you think I'm missing something blatantly obvious with that one. We have another Dunsparce and a Dunsparce. That has the sudden flash attack, 100 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed, and then you shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. Pretty interesting stuff. It's a stage 1 that you need to attach 4 energy to, which is a bit awkward, especially given that even if you're using double turbos, you're then reducing this to 60. Guaranteed paralysis is kind of scary with a card like Iono and Roxanne in the format, though. But I think realistically, I don't like this. This feels like a panic, try and win the game on the following turn play, rather than an efficient attacker that we're going to be able to cycle kind of play. We were able to cycle Excelgor because it was just 1 attachment, but this isn't 1 attachment, this is 2. So you're going to have to play some kind of energy acceleration with this. And even then the energy goes back into the deck. So yeah, it all just feels a little bit weird. Maybe there'll be something with this card though. Guaranteed paralysis is never anything to write off. So I feel like this card could be used in some capacity. I'm not sure where though, because I think we need some kind of acceleration as well as acceleration and way of dealing more damage, because 100 damage just isn't going to be enough a lot of the time. Again, another brilliant art though. There's loads of treats. There's a couple of Dedenne, there's a Scatterbug, and there's a load of berries everywhere as well. Brilliant card. We've got a couple of Tandemous. I'm showing these off simply because I absolutely adore Tandemous and Mousehold. This is brilliant. Look at this. They're using mushrooms as hats. This is hilarious. They're eating berries. They just look like they're having a great time. They've also got the Gnaw Up attack for 3 colorless. Put damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon equal to your number of Mousehold in play. So realistically, the best this can be is put 4 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon, which is a lot of damage counters. But 3 energy and having to get 4 stage 1s out realistically just isn't going to be happening particularly consistently, especially when they're only 60 HP stage 1s. Sableye is just going to have an absolute field day on these. So, yeah, unfortunately, this isn't quite going to work out. But, hey-ho, I will probably try and play some games with this regardless, just because I think this is one of my favourite Pokemon from the new generation. And the final card, and I think one of the most interesting ones, is Squawkabilly EX, 160 HP colorless basic Pokemon with the Lively Draw ability. On your first turn of the game, you may discard your hand and draw 6 cards. You can't use more than one Lively Draw ability during your turn. So this is Dedenne GX, but it can only be used on the first turn of the game. So immediately, like, okay, way more balanced, cool, and I agree with that. But this isn't a coming into play effect. This is you can just use this whenever. So you can play this in combination. You always had those awkward sort of Dedenne hands where you had Dedenne plus support, and you were like, oh well, I don't know whether I don't want a Dedenne answer, like I don't know whether to support first or Dedenne first or this, that, or the other. Now you can do both, which is kind of crazy. It's basically a Dedenne if you want it to be a Dedenne, because you can just choose to bench it and then discard your hand. But you can also choose to bench it and then play a supporter, or play, various other cards and then still have Lively Draw. Maybe you want to play an Iono or play, some kind of search effect first or something like that, or play a research first, but still have access to the Lively Draw later on in the turn. You can do all of that. So it's like a more flexible Dedenne, but you can only use it on the first turn of the game, which I think is a brilliant way of balancing this. I don't think that's going to take away from the card at all, because if you think about it, Dedenne, any Dedenne you used on the first turn of the game basically had on the first turn of the game, like you can only use it on the first turn of the game, and then it becomes a sort of a bench sitter. So this is essentially just an it's weird to say, it's like a side grade. Again, it's another side grade from Dedenne AX, but it's kind of it's an upgrade if you've had to play it, because it's no downside. You still had to bench the Dedenne back in the olden days. You still have to bench the Squawkabilly. But now that you can't use Dedenne in the late game, you never have to bench it. So it's never like a liability from then on, which is nice. Also, starting it is brilliant. Or not brilliant, but it's not as bad as starting Dedenne anymore, because you can still use Lively Draw. You can also search for this with Nest Ball and stuff, which wasn't a thing back then. So yeah, really, really interesting one. I actually, like I say, it's weird to say that it's an upgrade because it's now limited to the first turn, but it's not necessarily an upgrade, but it's like not necessarily a downgrade. It's just like a side grade. It's a downgrade, but it's not as bad as it may seem, because it means that, one, people aren't going to be able to go turbo, like multiple Dedennes, and then Dedenne for the following turn and stuff like that, which is, I think, one thing that a lot of people didn't really like about Dedenne. So that's really good. I like that change a lot. I also like the fact that it's nest ballable and you can start it so that it's never like a feels bad, because I think Squawkabilly is, because of this on the first turn of the game and you can't use more than one, I think it is basically always ever only going to be a one of, except for the very, very rare situations where you have to use Squawkabilly on turn 1, which it may be a 2 of, because you don't want to prize it. But even then we have Hisui and Heavy Ball. So I'm pretty sure like this makes Squawkabilly guaranteed a 1 of. So all of these kinds of upgrades to not being coming into play effect is really good for that aspect. It means that you're not limited to, or you're not hurt by starting it. And again, it's no, like, if you've had to use it, it's the exact same as having to use it at Dedenne, so you're in no worse position. Yes, you can't use it in the late game, but it's kind of up in the air whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because some people will say it's not really a bad thing. I don't want people to be able to just Dedenne every turn like they used to be able to. Some people will be of the mindset of, oh, but now it's, if you don't get to use it turn one, it's just a dead card in your deck. But because it's only ever a one-of, it's only ever one dead card in your deck. So yeah, it's a really, really weird one. I think it's better than Dedenne. I think it's better for the game than Dedenne. I think it's probably realistically a side grade or a downgrade. But I think it's better for the game than Dedenne. And arguably it might just be an upgrade because of the exact text that it's not a coming into play effect. So Nest Ball doesn't affect it. Starting it doesn't affect it. All of that kind of stuff. That might be enough of an upgrade for this to still be a net positive on Dedenne. So yeah, really, really interesting card. I expected to see a lot of play. It always feels kind of bad having to put these stage 2s onto, or 2-price Pokemon onto the bench, but we've had them all the way through the past 3 formats. We've had Shaman, we've had Lele, we've had Dedenne. So it's something that we've kind of got used to. So yeah, I'm interested to know whether you think this is an upgrade, a downgrade, a side grade on Dedenne. I'm almost on, because I think the changes are positive for the game of Pokemon as well, I'm almost on the side of it being an upgrade on Dedenne, but I can completely understand why this seems like a downgrade for sure. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting one. I think overall for the health of the game, though, it's probably an upgrade on Dedenne, which is really weird to say because it's obviously worse because you can only use it once and you can't use it after the first turn. But I think that's probably a good thing. And plus we get the bonus of it not being a coming into play effect. So yeah, really, really interesting one. Another card I expect to see quite a lot of play, to be honest. So yeah, we'll have to see how that sort of evolves. It's also got the energy flow attack, 20 damage, and attached up to basic energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. So it's even got like a utility attack for any energy that you end up discarding off of Lively Draw as well. So that's a nice thing also. So yeah, very, very interesting cards. I think Iono is crazy strong. I think Squawkabilly is very, very strong, and I think chein-pao and Baxcalibur look to be a very, very strong archetype as well. So yeah, really interesting stuff. This is going to be NAIC set, so we're going to be able to... I'm so sad I'm not going to NAIC this year, because I would love to be one of the first to play this this format. It would be really exciting. There is a chance, actually, that this isn't NAIC... When is this set being released? Paldea Evolved. Let's see if it says on this page very quickly. I think it's like the 7th of June. The June the 9th. So yeah, this is going to be NAIC set. I'm so sad I'm not going to NAIC this year because I would absolutely love to play this set for the first time. But yeah, hey ho. Let me know what you think about some of these cards down in the comments. I think there's some very, very strong ones. Very excited to see how these shape up in the game. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Jack from OmniPoke, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers, everyone.